Hello and welcome to Fever Insider Live After Dark. Brian Haenchen, Chloe Peterson, Tony East here with you, recapping a what I would describe as a dud of an outing for the Indiana Fever, kind of as was to be expected, 90-68 against the Las Vegas Aces. We all have to write, so this, I will admit, will be a tighter show. Chloe, let's start with you, then we'll go to Tony. We'll have a brief discussion, and then we're going to get to putting pen to paper.
Yeah, this is honestly kind of what I expected with this game. Becky Hammond said, after Sunday's game that she was going to have a talk with her team, and also that A'ja Wilson doesn't drop two stinkers in a row. And I think both of those things happened. Obviously, she had what I assume to be, a strong chat with her team, and they came out and they punched first. That was something that Stephanie White said post-game. They punched first, and Indiana didn't even really punch at all. So obviously Kelsey Mitchell was pretty limited tonight. They were a lot more physical with her. I don't even remember what she had. How many did she have? She had 13 points. But yeah, a lot different than the 34 she had on Sunday. And obviously A'ja Wilson returned to form with 10 of 18 from the field and 25 points. So
I thought the Aces were better at everything compared to their game one level, right? And I know that sounds very obvious when they win the game by 22 points, but defensively they were way more connected, right? There was no space to even get into the lane, I felt like, for the Fever guards. That's why that Odyssey Sim stretch late in the third and early in the fourth quarter stood out so much. So it was like, oh, finally, like some rim pressure for these Fever guards. That was only happening. Right, Mitchell takes 14 shots, but almost half of them are threes. They didn't really have the offensive pop against the Aces defense. That's why they got a lot of wide open threes. The Aces were willing to live with those. Lexie Hull made some. That's about it. And then offensively, yeah, A'ja Wilson was way better. When Jaloid hit her first three, I thought, oh boy, another star player is going to get going for Vegas. It's going to be tough. I agree with this comment. They did look already in bed. They were stuck in the mud, and every Aces change, they could just never quite figure out how to overcome them or get rolling in the way they want.
Let's talk about Lexie Hull. Obviously, the big news before the game, Lexie Hull put on the availability list, stats report, back injury. She was listed as questionable, correct? Wound up playing. Chloe, you mentioned it on tweet, watching it on TV. Tony, I'm sure you kind of picked up the same thing. Never looked quite comfortable. Sitting up there in the stand afterwards, post-game also looked really uncomfortable. Chloe, why don't you get the folks updated on what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, she warmed up as normal, doing her shooting routine, doing her stretching routine, did a couple extra stretches on her back, but the entire time she just looked a little bit stiff. Obviously not enough to keep her from playing. And, she talked post-game and credited the massage therapist, the athletic trainers, everybody who worked with her over the past, 36 hours, because she suffered the injury first. Steph White said in the first quarter of Sunday's game, but she kind of played through it. She didn't think it was that big of a deal. And then she woke up on Monday morning. It was just inflamed. So it's kind of been a rush of however many hours that is, where they wanted to get her healthy enough to play. And she obviously, was a little stiff out there. She was still the only Fever player to hit more than one three-pointer tonight. So I would say, despite the back injury, I'd say she played pretty well. She obviously still went for those, rebounds as she usually does, jumping under the basket. There were multiple times she fell, and I was getting a little worried after some of those times where it looked like she was grimacing. She was a little slow to get up, but every time she got up and she would run back down, and she fought through it.
I don't really think she ever takes bad threes, and her taking 11 is kind of the sign of the way the Aces defended, to what I said earlier. Like, they were really willing to live with that shot, to not let Mitchell or Sims or even Boston see space in the lane. And it just so happens that, I mean, maybe they dramatically changed their game plan 2 hours before the game upon learning of Lexie Hull's injury. But I imagine that was going to be their plan anyway. And it's even better when Hull's kind of hurt and can't really take advantage of the space in front of her with as much movement and is more willing to take the shot, which is fine. She's a fine shooter. But the real thing for her is she's an important defender. She's guarding Jackie Young, right? If you're even slightly more upright in that matchup, that's not good. Jackie Young got in the lane a lot today, and she wasn't even finishing her own plays that well, but just bending the defense ever so slightly is really important. You could see Hall on the bench, Brian. You could see we were watching it with that big giant brace around her. Like, it's clear that something's bothering her, and if it affects her even 1%, it's affecting her in some way. So yeah, I don't know if she was like way worse in a way that it was clearly impactful, but given how important she became with how open she was and the defensive role she plays, it's a big injury.
Tony, you wrote about how the Aces hadn't seen the real Fever and the Fever hadn't seen the real Aces. Buddy, tonight sure seemed like
There they are.
Yep. Holy smokes.
I mean, but this is, I mean, besides NaLyssa Smith probably being above real NaLyssa Smith levels, which we'll probably talk about, like, yeah, this is pretty close, right? All their stars were pretty good or effective. Young got in the paint. Jewel Lloyd only took 3 shots, but was making them. Dan Evans was still great. And Chelsea Gray was just whipping the ball over the gym with these beautiful passes. And Asia was awesome. And, like, this is what Becky meant. You know, I'm not even trying to gas this up too much, but, like, Asia had 12 games with a better shooting percentage than this during the season. Like, a quarter of her appearances are just better than this. You know, it was above average, but, like, she can be better, you know, and she was still awesome. So, yes, they did a great job on her in game 1. They did not do even close to as good of a job in game 2. And when all the Aces stars look at least pretty good or they're comfortable in their role, yeah, they're a good team.
First 2 games of the series, Chloe, this is something you're talking about a little bit in the chat. I mean, it's really exposed the Fever's bench and just how thin this team is, largely due to injuries, obviously. It looks a lot different now, but Bree Turner had just an okay night. Tasha Howard struggled, and I think that forced Bree Turner in a little bit fewer minutes maybe. But, I mean, geez Louise, you get, 6 points off the bench, a minus 28, a minus 19. And the turnovers, it just was not a good night for the bench. And a trend that continued from game 1.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have much of bench depth because a lot of these players on the bench honestly would not be on the team right now if the Fever were healthy. But I think Bree Turner also has become kind of that fail-safe for when, you know, Natasha Howard is having a bit of a bad night defensively. So she comes in more or less so often depending on how Natasha Howard's doing. But obviously when Bree Turner struggles as well, that kind of suffers defensive-wise because Bree Turner, she's known for her defense. That's, you know, why she's been getting so many minutes recently. And when she struggles in that aspect too, it really just brings down, I would say, their defensive ability.
One last player to touch. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
No, that's good. I was going to do a stupid stab, but it doesn't matter.
One last player to touch on before we get to what was a big talking point during the post-game press conference. Tony, you alluded to it. NaLyssa Smith was phenomenal, the former Fever draft pick, or the past Fever draft pick. 18 points for her, 7 of 9 shooting, 7 rebounds, 4 fouls, stayed in the game, tore it up, shredded the Fever. Pretty damn impressive. Thoughts?
2, actually. One is, like, she just looked like she wanted it more sometimes, right? Especially on the glass. Like, you know, Leah post-game saying, yeah, rebounding was a big part of what made NaLyssa Smith so effective in this game. And she obviously made shots. We saw with the Fever that around the basket, like when she won Athletes Unlimited MVP, she's very good, especially on the offensive end. But the other thing that made this game special for her is they moved her defensively. She was on Aaliyah Boston a lot in game 1, like that very first possession. Aaliyah Boston went right at her and scored. Nope, that didn't happen like at all in this game. So changing her defensive assignment helped her on that end too, and I think allowed her to have a little more energy for the offensive end, which allowed her to go for those balls, finish those plays, and do something we saw a lot in the Fever land, miss some free throws as well, which was the only blemish on her great game.
Chloe?
I agree with Tony. There have been people coming back behind me, so I have nothing else to add.
Nothing will beat that show in Atlanta when Chloe had like the entire like circus running behind her in the elevator.
Okay, it's funny because the 2 games that Chloe's had sound behind her were the 2 that the Fever had the same problem. Their bench was a disaster in game 1 in Atlanta. They made 1 shot until Bree Hull made 1 late, and their bench made 1 shot tonight. Right? That in their worst games, they just look so miserably thin, and their depth has to be better. To go back to what you said earlier, we can talk about physicality now.
Yes, the physicality. Spoiler alert. Nobody was very happy with the physicality. Stephanie White talked about it pretty openly and aggressively. Becky Hammond said the physicality was out of control. That was just the one quote that I typed out and tweeted out. I mean, she was cooking tonight. She compared it to football. She said if this were the NBA, there would be fights afterwards, or fights because of the physicality. She likened it to football in the fact that, you know, you can't touch a player or you can't touch a receiver 5 yards off the line of scrimmage or whatever it is. But in the WNBA, and tonight specifically, you're allowed to just beat the shit out of another player the whole way down the floor. And it wasn't like she was just saying that the Fever got away with a lot of stuff. She's like, we fouled too and it wasn't called. So that was a very big point of consternation tonight.
I thought it was fun that Steph White and Becky Hammond had like completely different thoughts, because Steph White, she was talking about how the Fever couldn't get into a flow because fouls were called every 5-10 seconds. So that's how they could never really, get their game going. And then Becky Hammond came in and she was like, they're not calling anything. Physicality is out of control. So I guess both things can be true at once. I don't know, but we'll see.
Two sides of the same coin, as they say.
Yeah.
Do you guys like watching games when there's more fouls than minutes played? I mean, that's just the best, right? That's what everybody wants to
It was
see.
still a
game.
game that was under 2 hours.
No, I'm not even saying that to say like the refs are blowing the whistle too much, right? Like there were 41 fouls in this game. There were probably closer to 50 fouls in this
41
game.
fouls called in this game?
Yes, 19 on the Fever and 22 on the Aces.
Jesus.
Which is funny given the way the free throws shook out. The Aces just committed a lot fewer shooting fouls, but that's the Kelsey Mitchell and the screening and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a very, very physical game. And like Aaliyah Boston as the hub has been the that's a word, the most key thing for the Fever's high-level offensive success. And the Aces have a great front court that was great today. Like when it's going through the post a lot, as it was for the Aces in this game, you're going to get a lot of that physicality. And it's not fun for any player, but it's more fun for the team that wins, right? You got to find a way to make it part of the game and fight through it. It just happens to subtract a lot from the Fever's identity.
Yeah. So physicality was a thing. Maybe we'll pull some of this stuff from Becky Hammond because she did have some gems. We'll pull some of Steph White maybe for the show. I think we'll be back on Thursday. At least Chloe and I will. All the three of us will be back on Friday for post game. All three of us will have coverage from Game 3.
We can all sit in the same computer screen.
We could just like huddle together. Like I could just like pop up in the middle of you guys when I want to throw out I want to roll the ball out to you guys. I just pop up, say something, then go back to doing whatever I'm doing in the background. You guys finish talking, to pause in the action. I come back, cut through the awkward sides. It'll be great. Any hoodles? Yeah. Closing thoughts before we bag it for the night.
No.
Well, I would have some, but Chloe doesn't sound so excited about closing.
Tony can have his thoughts. I'm just
thinking just gotta
6:30 a.m. flight.
Yeah, sorry. Look, they just got to find some flow, right?
Yes.
Like clearly, this postseason has shown their best moments are when the Fever look like the Fever. I guess I would say is when they have any sort of offensive tempo. We've heard them say a million times that comes when their defense looks good. We've heard that, and we've seen that comes when their guards look good. Sims had a good game. Like that should have been enough for them to get it, but Mitchell did not, and their pace was just not there at all because of the physicality in the Aces defense. Whatever it takes from an adjustments perspective, from who's initiating, from where they're setting screens, whatever, they've got to find a way to get their tempo back in Game 3 because the Aces control just everything in this game.
Best of 3 series from here. Fever have home court advantage. It's going to be really fun to see how it shakes out. Just like Chloe, she's able to make her flight in 4 hours or whatever it is. But for Tony East from his home and will be able to sleep in his own bed, Brian Haenchen, I will also be sleeping in my own bed, and Chloe Peterson will be sleeping in a hotel bed if she gets to sleep at all before running out to the airport for an early morning flight. We thank you all so much for watching. We'll be back with you on Thursday. Bye. Oh, wait. Whoops.